So, hello, Jasmine. How are you? Thank you so
Hi,
much for
Anna.
joining me. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me here. Where are you? Should we get
I'm
started with?
in I'm in Sydney, Australia,
Mm,
and it's really beautiful here today, as it is most
mhm.
days. It's so I don't have a problem or a bad thing to say, except that it's great. It's a good day.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so good. I'm so jealous. I'm joining you from Stockholm today, and it is a beautiful day in Stockholm, I will say, but this is by Stockholm standards. So it's 16 degrees. It's not
Oh
25,
wow.
but you know what?
Okay.
We'll work with it. It's beautiful. Spring
Yeah,
has
that's
sprung.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's wonderful, and I bet the cherry blossoms are out.
They are, and they're stunning, which is very nice.
Oh, that's
Yes.
neat. Cool.
So thank you. So Jasmine, you've had an incredible career, and we've got to know each other a little bit through a product that we've been working on together. But it's really exciting to have you here just for a bit of an informal chat to hear a little bit about your background and also to talk a little bit about some of the concepts which I think is super important for teams. I mean, you're an organizational psychologist. You're also like specializing in cross-cultural teams. And you've worked in, things like maximum security prisons. You also do executive coaching. So you've had an incredibly diverse career. Mostly it seems geared around sort of supporting teams or groups of people to be able to
Mhm,
function better.
mhm.
So would you be able to give us just like a very short background into, what your career trajectory has been, if you can, uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah.
nutshell, and
Well,
also what is the most exciting things that sort of has led some of the decisions, because you've moved through a few different backgrounds.
yes, yes. Well, I think as an organizational psychologist, first of all, I love business. I've always loved business. I
Mm,
come from a business family. So we would sit at the table and talk about how everybody's business was doing as a family, and it was quite a lot of
mhm,
fun. I've also loved my clinical work. So I'm
mm,
clinically trained psychologist, and that's been a lot of fun. Um, my maximum security stuff is I wanted to be a profiler, and
mm,
I worked in maximum security prisons for about 4 years. But what I really loved, and what I've always loved, is I've always
mm,
loved teams. Um,
mm.
don't know if it's because I'm also a family therapist, so I see teams as like families at work, if that makes sense,
Yes.
and how you can bring joy to work. I've been lucky enough to work, with over 100 companies in Australia and around the world, and have been
Mhm,
lucky to have teams that were number one in their theater. So
mm,
I've worked across several industries, law, IT, construction, a few other ones. I can't remember. There's so many, but
mm,
I'm having a really great career, so I can't say a bad thing about it. I think also as now I'm a mediator, I think it helps me
mm,
with teams. Um, Look at how do we deal with people's personal mastery, and by that I
mm,
mean the way they communicate. Uh, what's their self-confidence level like? What's their responsibility like? Are they curious? Because we know
mm.
that people that are curious are the best kind of people to have in teams.
Yes.
People that have imagination, good communication skills, good social skills, very
Mm,
much like your emotional intelligence. Because if we're looking at
mm,
cross-cultural work, really it
mm,
has to do with three things. It has to do with the awareness you have of yourself, the knowledge
mm,
you have of the particular cultures that you're dealing with, and the skills you have in navigating and being able to
mm,
navigate, and not just, you don't want to be away from conflict, but you don't want to be conflictual. You want to be in that
mm.
middle ground where you're actually enjoying each other and getting to work,
Yes.
which is my favorite. um,
Yes.
Getting
I love that.
ideas.
Yes, I love that concept of sort of families at work, because I think you would see that a lot of the concepts that allow people to perform well in a family, or the things that break down when you see families that are not functioning well, are probably quite analogous to the things that we see in the workplace as well.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
can
And I
imagine.
think we have to. I think we have to really think about, we spend so much time at work, Anna, that it's really important to in Spanish, we say tomar el jugo de la vida, which means that you want to suck the juice from life. You know, you want to
Yes.
always have that joy, or have as much joy as you can at work. And I think that, to me, for me, that's one of the most important things about working with people that I choose to work with, and companies
Yes.
that I choose to work with, is
Yeah.
do they have a sense of good problem solving and innovation and imagination, and are they really ready to embark on a journey of really continuous improvement? And that's really exciting, because if they
Yes.
are, then they'll be great with teams, because teams
Yes.
really need a lot of nurturing, a lot of psychological safety. Um, and when we look at psychological safety in the team way, I'm thinking of lack of fear, because fear kind of creates anxiety and kind of dampens down our imagination. So
Yes.
psychological safety is quite critical at work, as
Absolutely.
is, and we're finding as is, not just psychological safety, but emotional intelligence, social intelligence, the
Mm.
ability to actually get along with other human beings.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, and I love this concept of psychological safety, and it's obviously something that we've been working together on, and that gets me really excited because I guess, to intro for people who are watching this, I guess psychological safety, the best definition that I've seen is simply a shared belief that a culture supports interpersonal risk taking, that is okay. It's okay to take risk. And so that is why I think it's been shown by research to be so critical as one of the most important levers that we can pull in terms of determining performance, particularly with highly innovative teams in backgrounds where you're required to be at the cutting edge and you need to be taking risks to be able to be performing as well as you can. And so I wonder if you have seen, I'm sure that you've worked with a whole spectrum of teams, some that are working beautifully, but I'd say that most of them are not working beautifully when you come in, when you're actually called in to assist them. And so how do you first sort of take the measure of a culture, and then sort of look at thinking about concepts like psychological safety, but also the other sort of individual drivers of team performance that you've mentioned, like how are people's social skills, are they curious, etc. What's your sort of process in terms of making an initial assessment of this? And is there a way for us to support, particularly sort of, I'm thinking middle management, because I think this is something that comes up a lot. They're often not given the resources or the tools to be able to make these kind of assessments, and also to try and improve things like psychological safety.
Yeah, psychological safety, I think when I come in, well, psychological safety for me also blends trust and respect. And we know,
Yes.
this is a fact, this is not my opinion, that the most high
Mm,
performing teams are teams that have incredible trust. And the
mm,
trust that they have catapults them to psychological safety, to then be able to kind of negotiate and talk out loud about things. So probably the
mm,
first thing I do is do an assessment, but in a playful way, because I
mm,
think play is really important. Whether it's a game or whatever, getting them, engaging them with me, getting them to trust me, and
mhm,
trying to capture their, as adults,
mm,
their childlike quality of curiosity and of
mhm,
imagination, and looking at what values they have. Do they
mm,
want to establish some values? Because we know that there has to be some operating procedures, that sounds so
mm.
worky, but it is, where
But yes,
you have to have some ground rules for the way you, relate to each other.
yes.
So things like, sometimes you can tease, but you can go beyond teasing, where
Mm,
it's really hurtful. Name
mm,
calling,
mm,
being able to, and a lot of times what I get people to do as a team is if this is, say, our third meeting, I do a little sentence completion. I get everybody to, and I do this with boards too, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
say, this month I'm feeling blank, or today I want to make sure that we talk about blank. And
Yes.
and also that they get to share a bit of themselves, because
Mm,
one of the things that we know, particularly if you're dealing on a Zoom level with
mm,
virtual teams, is that you really need to make sure that there's enough play and engagement, and you're
mm.
not just going into work, that they're
Yes.
actually, and I think that's really hard for people. I think that's really hard for
Mm,
leaders because they don't know what to do. So
yes.
something like, yeah, I don't blame them. It's really hard. For
Yeah.
leaders, it's a
Yeah.
really hard gig. So being able to maybe to teach people something, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe to talk about, I don't know, this sounds really corny, but your favorite movie or your favorite recipe, or you, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe, talk about your book club, or just have a moment in the beginning where you're actually just what I would call lubricating the conversation so that we're all
Yes.
coming to a safe place to begin work. To me, the
Yes.
work is secondary to
Mm,
the actual play and socialization and lubrication of the conversations. That to me is the
mm-hmm.
most important. Even in mediation,
Absolutely.
I find that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yes,
yeah.
in terms of warming the room. And what I think is really interesting, I've actually heard a really interesting anecdote, which was that somebody was working with a sort of cross-cultural distributed team where they had one, half of their team based in one place and the other half based
Mhm.
in another. And their only engagement was based via Zoom. So they've never met in person, which is the case for most modern people these days. We
It
have
is
those
more,
sorts of
yeah,
relation
absolutely.
in
Yep.
our working environment. And it's interesting because this was particularly dealing with engineers and developers. And someone had said that they had really, really enjoyed a particular anime show.
Oh,
And this
yes.
particular manager was like, oh, that's interesting, but anime is not necessarily my thing. So great. Thought it was just a throwaway comment. Interesting. And then immediately noticed a drop in engagement from that staff member or employee, and noticed that they started showing up to meetings a little bit later, and perhaps that they were having some slight issues with work performance, just that they were not vibing in the way that they were previously. And when he sort of had this conversation about why is this, and this employee actually said to him, well, I mentioned that I really like this anime show, and I actually didn't feel like you acknowledged or showed any interest in the thing that I had shared with you, this personal idea. And I think it was a huge light bulb moment, because it's like, not only is it important to invite people to share, but it's also incredibly important that we empathize and reciprocate upon what is shared with us, right? Because that is how we form the trust. It's not just a
Exactly.
one-way communication. Yes. And I wonder, do you
Exactly.
see that often? That I imagine it would be a common sort of issue, in the sense of we've all participated in, team building experiences where we say, please share something about yourself, but there's no feedback. There's no like, oh, I thought that was interesting, I also like this, or I've never really, so do you see that? Is there a way to sort of encourage that sort of like cyclical exchange of communication, and so that we can build trust?
Yes, I think that a lot of it has to do with how much you are open to collaboration as opposed
Yeah.
to the doing, but
Mm,
actually the being of collaboration. And I'm thinking of a highly technological firm that I worked with that were trying to
mm-hmm,
get their computer chip to Silicon Valley. They had
mm-hmm,
49 people in the group.
mm-hmm,
47 were from different cultures. And
mm.
I remember
Wow.
and it was a Japanese company, and I remember the the head of technical development. Now they all had like double masters in design engineering, so they were
Yes.
all really like, really smart. And
Yeah.
they all sat down, and they had sandwiches, and they had even popcorn, and I think that really took some people's sense of play, that they had popcorn.
Mm,
And And they started saying, we need to get this chip to Silicon Valley by X date. We're not sure we're going to make it. So we thought we'd bring you all here and somewhere on the screen. And we thought we'd get together with all of you so you could give us some feedback and some ideas on how you think we could do it. And how, because it's going to take all of us at least 50 hours a week, or I forget what it was. And so I sat in on this meeting, and it was, how can we do this and get it done quickly and yet still have fun and check in with each other, which they checked in every 3 days, interestingly enough. And they also decided to do certain things, like to set everybody up at home and make sure that everybody had the best computers that they possibly could have. And because it's a tech firm, that was a breeze. But also
and I imagine this was pre-COVID, in the sense that that wasn't sort of, this was a revolutionary sort of thing to do back then.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so and they were, and we looked at stress levels and gave them some stress exercises. And so when we met as all of us, we met together, we would do some stress exercises, we get them to do some breathing, and then we'd have fun, and we'd maybe somebody tell a story. So it had to be a story that you made up in your head. So so everybody took turns to tell a story. And we had a list of 49 people who was going to tell a story from this group and this group and this group. And then you got a prize for who told the best story. And it was amazing to me, amazing how delighted and innovative everybody was, and how calm they were. And they were able to get that chip to Silicon Valley and win the day, because the Japanese company, I can only say, kind of wrapped their company arms around this intelligent group of people to try to really make them feel safe. And so we even gave ways that you could give feedback so that people didn't take offense. And you focused on the issue, not the person. And so we did communication skills. We did all kinds of things in preparation for this 6-month haul of trying to get this computer chip to Silicon Valley. So, so being open to collaboration is a really big thing, because not everybody is open to that.
Yes. Interesting. Yeah, that's such an interesting story, and it really shows. I love that sort of metaphor of like wrapping your arms around this team that you're asking so much of, no? Because it needs to be a give and a take. And I love the concept of using play as the vehicle for that, as the vehicle for sharing, for opening up. And often we tend to think that, the content of our work needs to be serious, but sometimes I think we've all felt the best that, the most rewarding experiences we have at work is where there is this element of play, and that's invoked.
Exactly.
I wonder how important it is, though, to sort of separate these experiences in terms of like setting guidelines around, like, when are we playing and when are we working? Do you think that this is an important thing to be communicated in terms of having very clear boundaries, or is it okay to blend?
Well, I think it's okay to blend, but I do think there are 3 things that I think are really critical. And I wrote some notes down for myself. Some kind of foundational elements for people working remotely. The first thing is play. The second thing is purpose, finding purpose in what you're doing, letting people know what is important. So if I look at my little Japanese company example, they actually said, if we get this over the line, we will be able to do blah, blah, and blah. And at the end of this, no matter what happens, we'll be having a party, and we'll be giving you a bonus and all the rest of it. But it was really the treatment of the people, because we had people that were Czech and French and Italian and all over. So understanding the purpose, getting people to understand that the purpose that the work really matters, and
Mm-hmm.
really getting people to understand that. And
Mm,
then the third thing is looking at potential, which is a bit down the road of what the
mm,
team can achieve in with its potential. But play, I have to say, is the very first thing, which is
mm.
why I was very entranced, I'll say that, with your game, because and in the product that you were talking about, because
Yeah.
I think that is so critical to just play, to get people
Yes.
to really be creative and to really be
Mm,
curious. Uh, and that
mm,
takes self-confidence to be curious. Because if you're in a
mm,
safe place, you'll really want to be curious. You want to understand about what certain things mean. So
mm,
debriefing a game and debriefing it so that, well, if you did this, then this would have happened, and really debriefing it so that people understand for
mm.
next time how to kind of quickly step into a play mode and
Yes.
get them engaged
Yes.
immediately.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to work on with our games, and I think really informs the types of experiences we're trying to give people, is that we're really trying to build a safe place for people to fail. Because so important in this whole thing is the failure that we see in communication, which, you know, is, even if most of the communication we have with our colleagues is positive, we always remember that one time that it didn't work. Our brains are wired this way, right? That we sort of have this hindsight bias for the when it didn't work. And so
yeah,
I wonder
yeah,
if you have like any tips for a team that maybe has suffered a hurt, you know,
okay,
something like this. There's been some sort of a rupture, you know, whether that be, it could be something as simple as a change in leadership, right? That can make people sort of retract. You might have them at one stage with one individual, and then they've had a change in leadership, and all of a sudden people are sort of back in this point of figuring themselves out and figuring out how they're safe to play. Do you have any sort of recommendations for dealing with a team that maybe has either
yeah.
suffered a hurt where something's gone wrong, or there's just been a change that has made people close up?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, first of all, that we do know about trust is that people can rebuild trust. We know that.
Yeah. Okay.
We know
Mm-hmm.
that once people are hurt or there has been a hurt and there's been
Mm,
distrust, people don't necessarily just close down. If
mm,
people are able to kind of set up a process where they actually discuss and have what I call a difficult conversation about how it went down, what's going to
mm,
happen now, and what will you
mm,
do differently in the future, and how can we prevent this from shutting us down as a team?
mm-hmm,
Because we know that teams that have high trust and
mm,
have a way of collaborating, we know that they will excel. We know that. That's not my opinion. That's so well researched. But we also
yes.
know that people that have been hurt are fearful. So the
Mm,
more you release that fear or you talk about the fear, and you
mm-hmm,
don't have to spend days doing it,
mm,
but you can say, well, God, that was scary. Or
mm,
and maybe I'll talk about an experience that I had that could have shut me down. It didn't,
mm-hmm,
but it could have. So
mm-hmm,
I worked for a very, very famous CEO here in Australia, very famous,
mm-hmm,
top 5 companies.
mm,
And I did some work for them where they were trying to do some work in Malaysia. So I
mm-hmm,
was putting teams together and choosing the teams, and it was a really exciting project. And I remember the CEO, we were in a boardroom, there were maybe 25 people, and
mm-hmm,
he asked me a question. And I said, well, really, I'm not sure. And he
mm-hmm.
started yelling and he said, how dare you? We pay you X, Y, and Z, and you're trying to tell me you don't know what the? And he starts swearing. And I'm sitting
Wow.
there thinking, Wow. And everybody was, I could feel the eyes on me because everybody was.
God,
So,
what an
and
experience.
yeah, it was formative, I have to say. So I
Uh-huh.
then there was quiet when he finished. And I said,
Mm.
well, you know, I have difficulty answering people when they yell at me because I'm focused on the yelling as opposed to the thinking. So let me just say
Mm.
this to you. If you push me for an answer right now, I'd say no. But if you give me till 6 o'clock tonight, I'm happy to research that answer and come back to you with a
Wow.
more thoughtful approach.
Mm.
And
Wow.
everybody, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And the next day
Mm.
he's, he sent me flowers. He called me up and asked me if I was okay, all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
So, but I think for me, it was, you have to have confidence as a collaborator and also a mediator that you're really trying
Mm.
to do your best,
Yes.
and that this person over here who is a huge leader, captain of industry,
Mm.
what's going on for him? Again, that could be
Mm.
my psychologist self
I'd say
thinking,
so.
what's going on for him? And
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I have to say, a lot of people came up to me. They were very kind to me because I just
Mm-hmm.
came in and was working on this project with them for 3 months, and I hadn't,
Yes.
a lot of people. I mean, I wasn't part of the furniture, thank God, but he
Mm-hmm.
was very intimidating. And we had a
Mm.
little chat once he was able to calm down a few weeks later on what
Mm.
happens to him when he's stressed and
Yes.
and and is his intention to get people afraid, or is his intimidate, or is his intention to really get an answer that's fulsome about a
Yes.
particular issue?
Yes.
And he
Interesting.
mentioned feeling stressed, and collaboration is really nice, but I need to know by 5 o'clock tonight X, Y, and Z. And had he said
Mm-hmm.
that to me, had he said, Jasmine, I know you say you don't know, but I'm really worried about X, Y, and Z. Could we get an answer to that by 5 o'clock tonight? That would have been a
Yes.
totally different thing. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
that could have been very hurtful. It was more startling than it was hurtful, because
Mm.
I
Mm.
haven't been yelled at since I was in year 3.
Yes.
So
Especially not in a room full of people.
yeah. So
Wow.
so you have to have the skills. And I think
Yes.
that in my individual executive coaching, helping people navigate through
Yes.
how they get their message across when they're under the pump.
Yes, absolutely. And so, and I mean, that is, I think, absolutely your training showing through, because I can definitely say I would not have the presence of mind to be able to say what you said in response to somebody like that. It's so impressive. But I think that it does
Well,
get at what, each of us can try and sort of bring and realize that, managing a work culture and also maintaining psychological safety is reciprocal. It's a two-way thing, and we
yes.
can both assert and ask for things to be made safe for us, but there should also be a response. We need to have this sort of exchange, as you say, an inviting of collaboration. And I think I like that how you're saying it would have been a completely different scenario if he had have invited you to collaborate on solving a problem. And
Yes.
I hope that that's something that
Yes.
everybody can take away, to realize that yes, we
Hmm.
we we react, but that an invitation to collaborate is curative in some of those ways. So that's a
It
really
it
interesting
is.
story.
It
Yeah.
it is, and I think that it takes me back to another question you asked me, which was, what do I do when I land with a team? I
Yeah.
think I'm very strict about how you communicate. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody says something to someone else, I'll say, John, did you mean X or did you mean Y?
Yep.
And they go, oh, well, I just assumed that she would know it was Y, and
Yep.
and I'm really strict because I
Mm.
want people to listen carefully. I want
Yep.
people to establish rapport effectively. I want people to give feedback properly. So there's a whole raft of communication skills that I'm very fussy about, making
Yes.
sure that my teams that I'm working with understand and know how to communicate this.
Yes.
So my biggest problem in companies, I have to say, is that when I'm working with two teams and they're really juiced and they're going and they're excited and they're doing stuff, other people in the company will go, well, why aren't we doing that? Well, why don't we
Right.
get so there's a little bit
Yeah.
of a jealousy or an envy factor that I'm working with these
Yes.
teams and not them. So I think it's
Yes.
because when people see other people having fun, having
Yes.
trust, having respect, being calm in the face of having to develop things, other people
Yes.
want that too.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think just to bring things to a close, if we were to say there was one thing that you would suggest to, say, someone in middle management who's dealing with a distributed team that they've never met, they're navigating cultural communication issues, they're navigating this new world of work where they're not having, direct person-to-person interactions with the people that they're working with. What is one thing that they might be able to do on a sort of semi-regular basis that could support their team to have this, sense of safety and of play and of,
Mhm,
therefore
mhm,
innovation? Yeah.
mhm. I would say set a list of I would say guidelines for how we meet together, given that you're in
Uh-huh.
Tokyo and you're in China and whatever. And
Yes.
always start with something that will engage everyone.
Yes.
Whether
Okay.
it's as stupid as what's your favorite dog, or if you were an
Mm-hmm.
animal, what animal would
Mm-hmm.
you be, or
Mm-hmm.
talk about the happiest you've been in the last week and why.
That's a nice one.
Stuff that's really important to kind of get people engaged and thinking. And if it's been
Yes.
exceptionally stressful, I would say, like, maybe a sentence completion like, it's been a really hard week because this week I feel blah, and
Yes.
complete that
Okay.
sentence. And I have
Yep.
found at board meetings that that particular one can be
Mm.
quite eye opening, because everybody comes
Yep.
to board meetings with expectations. She's in
Yes.
HR, he's doing, finance, he's doing marketing.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that's really important to begin to have a kind of a way that we kind of circle around the work and just kind of
Yes.
make it safe for us.
Yes, the
Does
glue
that
that sort
help?
of makes it, it does, I think. It makes it all feel worthwhile at the end of the day, I
Yes,
think, the glue
absolutely.
that binds us
Absolutely.
together. Yes,
That's
because I
right.
think the purpose is important, but it's also the people that you pursue the purpose with that matter.
That's
And we
right.
we all,
That's right. And then
yes,
exactly. And then that starts smacking of trust and respect.
yes,
And
yes.
and then we're on the road.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you so much. I think that we can
My
leave it there, but
pleasure.
thank you so much for having this conversation with me. If I was to
No,
do a
it's
sentence
great.
completion right now, it would be what's my happiest moment in the last week. It would be definitely chatting to you. So thank you so much for giving me your time. It's
My
always a pleasure
pleasure,
to see
Anna.
you.
Yeah,
Yes,
great to
and hear
see
the
you.
beautiful birds. I can hear them in from Sydney. I can hear them in the background. I'm
Yes,
very
I
jealous.
know they're gorgeous. I know. Take
All
care.
right.
Lovely to see
Thank
you.
you.
Take
You
care.
too. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.